It is 10 minutes after 5, if that clock is right. 11, it's 5:11. We do not have a quorum, but I will call the meeting to order with members Mark Dunn and Andrew Gnatic and the non-voting brains of the effort, the Honorable Kyle Finnell of PVPC. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Kyle. Just noting that we do not have a quorum, so this is a public meeting that will be informative, but we cannot make any decisions that require a vote.
Thank you, Mark. And good to see everybody. So today, I think we got a couple of provisions in the draft local smart growth zoning bylaw that we'd like to look at. On the agenda, I had marked down to clarify any outstanding details on permitted uses, dimensional density requirements. Mark was helpful and reached back out to the fire chief to ask about their opinion on building heights. I never saw a response. Mark, did you get any word back from the chief?
No.
Okay.
No, and I think I was going to try to stop over it, but I did not get around to stopping me over. So I know he's also been, it's probably been the worst month of his career as he's having to cut staff and all that. So maybe after tomorrow night's town meeting, I will see if I can speak with him.
Yeah, that was my assumption. Kind of the happenings in town. This was a low priority for the chief, and figured we can clarify that detail a little bit later. It's not urgent. Still needing to do a little bit of defining and looking into additional definitions to help us kind of tease apart the topic of multifamily housing. I know that's something that the community engagement, our summaries from the community survey back in 2024, and the summary of participation in our public forums back in May. Residents seem open to multifamily units that are kind of in the 4 to 8 dwelling unit range, maybe even into the 12 range. But the bylaw currently kind of defines all multifamily. If it's 4 or more units, it's just multifamily. So I think we still need to do a little bit of work to see what other communities have done to differentiate kind of the smaller end of that range, the 4 to 8 or so, and then the larger, kind of large apartment complexes. So that's a detail that we need to work on.
I'm sorry, Kyle.
I've got a slide deck. So yeah.
Your feed is coming through. Your feed is coming through choppy. I don't know if you can hear me smoothly. I missed part of, you were saying that based on the public feedback, what was the preference? Like 2 to 4?
So yeah, so some of the feedback was that they're open to kind of the 4 to 6, 4 to 8 units in a multifamily.
Yep.
But the current definition is kind of limitless. It's just 4 plus. So we need to figure out how we can define that. And it might be, clarifying a small apartment, large apartment, and kind of putting numbers to that. That's an option. But need to just do a little bit more research there. I think those are the two main outstanding topics that we need to circle back to at some point. And otherwise, I think we're ready to jump into kind of the new topic of discussion today, which would be parking. So bear with me. Let me just, I'm reacquainting myself with sharing on Teams. So just bear with me here. Share this. I believe that's sharing currently.
Yep. Smart growth planning.
Fill the entire screen page. There we go. Okay. That's the entire presentation, I believe. All right. So today, two topics of discussion. And again, this is informative. So I recognize we won't really come to any decision, but just to inform you of where we are in regards to section 7, which pertains to parking requirements. And I guess we can have a discussion on district delineation, but we can't really make a determination at this point, and that's fine.
Right.
So just to remind everybody, our current parking requirements for Hadley can be found in the zoning bylaw, section 5(4), and that sets a minimum requirement in the limited business, and industrial districts, which is essentially the areas that we're looking at along Route 9. So that minimum is equal to twice the floor area of the building. So it's a 2-to-1 ratio of parking to building floor area. And just to give some perspective on that, crunch some quick numbers. 10,000 square foot building would have a minimum requirement of 20,000 square feet dedicated to off-street parking. A typical parking space, 9 feet by 18 feet, kind of on the smaller side of a typical parking space, but approximately 162 square feet. That means a 10,000 square foot building has 124 spaces, right? So you can, do the math for 1,000 square feet per 1,000 square feet of building area. You're getting 12 parking spots, 12.4, right? And so that minimum is pretty abundant in terms of parking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Right.
and this is something that the planning board is wanting to explore. It's something that I'm doing some research for the planning board right now, trying to create a short little report looking at how other communities structure their parking requirements. Because it's been pointed out that, parking at some of the smaller plazas, let's say like where the LL Bean store is, where 110 Grill, like, that feels very different getting into that parking lot and navigating versus, what is it, the Big Y that's further down towards Amherst, or even across the street and at the Home Depot, right? The parking lots feel very different. And that's primarily because the current zoning really only sets requirements for total area. It doesn't say that a parking space has to be a certain size. It doesn't say that the lane of travel needs to be a certain size. It doesn't say that, they need to be a certain orientation even. So this is where
it doesn't quantify based on the use group, the usage of the building, which I think is probably one of the more common ways to do it, that needs more than maybe, other warehouse, so, yeah.
absolutely, Mark, you're right. And this is where, smart growth zoning allows for a lot of flexibility and, kind of local control of parking. So section 7, there's 4 kind of subsections within the smart growth bylaw parking requirements. Section 7.1 about the number of parking spaces. That's where the bylaw will say, for this type of use, you need this many spots. 7.2 regarding shared parking. The template really encourages the reduction of parking space or space dedicated to parking, and they encourage it through shared parking lots. So, if particularly it makes sense if you have a mixed use development, you have residents over businesses, the kind of assumption is that during the business day, during business hours, those businesses will need parking and the residents will likely be going off on their daily commute or elsewhere and won't need the parking. And then it flips, when business hours close, folks come home, they need parking that's now available because employees have left and residents now can use the space. So that's the idea there. 7.3, the bylaw wants to, again, encourage a reduction of parking requirements and talks about how to do that. And then 7.4, location of parking, it's kind of stresses that for pedestrian-friendly development, parking needs to be behind the building.
I keep losing your audio. Is it just here? Andrew, are you also having Kyle's audio drop out or be chopped up?
No, I can hear Kyle's audio pretty well.
Really? Okay.
So then it must be here. Okay. All right. Sorry.
You're quite all right. It's a little choppy coming from you, Mark, and from the town. So if you need a repeat, just wave at me. So the bylaw says you have to establish maximums. You have to hit the ceiling where the current zoning sets the ground floor for parking. And then it encourages the ceiling to be lowerable, adjustable. And says that the town can set a minimum as well. Hi, Ronnie. Welcome.
So Ronnie just joined us. I'll just tell you, if you weren't able to follow us when we started, we don't have a quorum, so we can't vote on anything, but it's just going to be informational.
Okay.
And I'm apparently Andrew is hearing Kyle's audio. You'll hear it's coming through in bits and pieces here.
The area people seem to be having problems with.
Maybe it's at Amazon Web Services.
Yeah,
Okay, back to you, Kyle.
it's Antifa.
Yeah.
All right. I'll be very deliberate with my words, but the way that most communities approach setting that
More so than
maximum
usual.
threshold, yeah. There's no starting point, so there's a lot of variability. And typically communities say you need at most 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. And typically 1 parking space per 1,000 square feet of a commercial or a retail space. Again, there's a lot of variability and variation. Depending on that use. So like what Mark was saying earlier, your warehousing type of business has a different demand for parking as a restaurant has a different demand for parking compared to a dentist office and such. So if we look at how some communities tailor that non-residential parking, Restaurants may say one space for every 2 seats of occupancy or 4 seats of occupancy. A beauty or barber shop in the example of East Hampton, it's 2 spots for operator chair. So assuming there that you have the barber, beautician, hairstylist, and their customer at a given time. For the dentist, it's 5 for each practitioner and 1 for each 300 square feet, or whichever is greater. So we can start to think about, what makes sense, and we can get really detailed, or we can take a more general approach, which is what we've kind of started with. And so right now we've tried to keep it really simple, and we can tease this out if we want. But we stated that for a studio, we broke it down by bedrooms size for our dwelling, our residential uses. So for a studio or a 1-bedroom dwelling, maximum is 1 space. You can have 1 space. For 2-bedroom, we set it 1.2. And for 3+ bedroom units, 1.5 per unit. So the assumption there is that, there's going to be a mixture of those. Or multiple of those in a development, so that, if you had a multifamily, you had to have 20 units per acre by 40R standards. If half of those are 3-bedroom units, that's 15 spaces right there for 10 units. Right. So that's kind of what we were thinking. And we just decided for the non-residential use, if we set the maximum at 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area, then for those mixed use developments, we may have some of that kind of excess available for shared parking, right? To say you've got your 2 spaces for every 1,000 square feet. That gives you so many spaces. You've got a bunch of single 1-bedroom studio apartments above it. That adds up, but that might actually create a little extra. So, the 1-bedroom unit that has a small family, a couple living in it, could actually afford to have 2 spaces. So we thought this might be just a simpler, hopefully more elegant way to do it, but we're open to feedback.
I think what he said was 2 spaces per, the audio dropped out, so we heard 2, silence, 1,000 square feet.
Yeah.
So that's how it's a little confusing what we're hearing.
Is Nick in the
There's
room
not
still?
many, depend on how
Oh.
busy that place is.
No, Nick is gone. Before you came in, he took the example of what we currently have, which is a minimum. And by his math, that was like 12 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. I would differ on that, Kyle, and say that I believe, if I understand correctly, our 2 for 1 includes the parking and the aisles. So
Okay.
if you took a space that was 18, that was 10 by 18 and one that was 10 by 18, and you had a 24-foot aisle between them, then that would put you at 600 square feet would be 2 spaces. So it might change your math, but still, this is going to be considerably less than what Hadley uses currently.
I realize that this is, and I'm sorry, I thought the meeting was 5:30. I would have been here, but, that this is supposed to be smart growth where there's public transportation. But I keep thinking of where I live, there's, the 2-bedroom homes all have 2 cars, pretty much, and 1 bedroom often has somebody sitting. That's just my observation. I think of people struggling to find parking.
Yeah, I think that, and Kyle can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he said maybe before you got here that the state's draft guideline for the 40R wants a maximum of 2 spaces per dwelling unit.
Okay.
So that's a dwelling unit that could be
Oh,
one person, it could be a dwelling unit that's a 2-bedroom, 3-bed. So that's what the state is pushing for. It doesn't, and like you said, I think that's geared because it's intended to be on the mass transit.
okay.
And in theory, that's, it makes it easier to develop.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know how that's gonna play out. And I don't know what the towns that have them have found.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification on the current existing parking regulations, Mark. We do have to think about the aisle of travel. It is a net reduction compared to what Hadley is used to.
Yeah.
And again, the idea is that these will hopefully be more often than not mixed use projects, right? Which we can really emphasize shared parking to make most efficient use of the space for parking, right? Because I think if we go back to the smart growth principles, what we want to see in the future is less large area parking lots that are 80% empty 90% of the time, right? Except for Black Friday, right? Or Sunday after, services get out and everybody rushes to get, groceries or whatnot. So,
Or at the No Kings protest. But anyway.
right. And also keeping in mind, Ronnie, we're talking about the Route 9 corridor, which does have, I think, at least 3 bus routes that run up and down Route 9. We're talking about the area of Hampshire Mall, which has, bus service repeatedly throughout the day on any given day.
Well, I know they used to stop running when school was out, but
Or they reduce, I think,
Reduce.
yeah, I don't know if they
Yeah,
reduce,
I
maybe
think so.
some of the routes stop. Yeah.
I know one route has extra evening trips over the weekend. I think Thursday through Sunday they have extra trips to the Walmart mall kind of corner of South Maple. Correct me if I'm wrong. But this is kind of the starting point. This is something that if we want, I can do a little bit more research, provide a little bit more context to see how that compares. I would point everybody to the reference packet that you have. East Hampton is way more detailed, and they really break it down by use specifically. And for the most part, it's, for non-residential, generally speaking, it's 1 space per 1,000 square feet with some variation there. But East Hampton even says 2 spaces per dwelling unit for a one family dwelling. They don't break it down by bedroom. So
Is that East Hampton in general or in their 40R?
that's their 40R districts.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm only
Yeah, 'cause I
referencing
think-
40R.
Yeah, good, because I think what we're talking about right now would be a non-starter for Hadley in general. That's a separate issue, as you mentioned, that you're working with the planning board to look at modifying our current requirements for parking. They're arguably excessive and could be tailored to specific uses, as most municipalities, or more municipalities do. But yes, I think this is intended to be a special situation. So.
Right. So if we look at the next 2 sections for shared parking and the reduction of parking requirements, the state through the Housing and Livable Communities really strongly encourages, really stresses installation of shared parking. And they give some accepted methodologies of how to calculate what is the appropriate number of spaces for those shared parking facilities. One example is the Urban Land Institute's shared parking report.
Kyle, if I could just.
Yeah, Mark.
So just when you say shared parking, that means that you wouldn't have resident reserved spaces and then commercial spaces. You would have a free-for-all.
To my understanding, yeah.
Okay.
Outside of like a handicap accessible spots. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So they strongly encourage shared parking and stress reduction of parking maximums based on criteria. So thinking about, if you had a if you had a site that had physical constraints, like a lot of wetlands or just not enough area to, hit that maximum or fit within the minimum window that the town sets. They would want to make sure that this provision is present so that applicants can reduce the number of spaces. And so generally speaking, communities just copy and paste, put in the text that comes from the state, from the template, for these 2 provisions regarding shared parking and the reduction of parking requirements. So in the Hadley working draft, we did add a minor provision that really just says shared parking for mixed use projects will be required if it's feasible. So the idea, hi Kishore.
All good? Yeah. I think there's a bad connection or something, so the audio you'll see kind of drops out. Okay. Anyway, yeah.
So the text in red is
We
our minor
now-
addition.
We now have a quorum.
And so I think this really just says that for mixed use projects, we're trying to say shared parking is the expectation And if it's not feasible, the developer needs to make the case for a higher number or for separate parking facilities.
Kyle, is there, I mean, are you simplifying this for our consumption or, I mean, I'm assuming that other communities that have done that put in language, because otherwise determining if it's viable or not could be, if it's feasible, we could be criticized for being arbitrary and capricious. You know, I like Keyshaw, course, I have less parking and I don't like Ronnie, so I hold her to the full amount without having some criteria for what's feasible.
So it's not necessarily simplifying for consumption. I think it's prioritizing more efficient use of space. And because the provision cites acceptable methodologies for calculating what the shared use demand is, I think you have some kind of objective criteria to fall back on when you make that determination that it's infeasible for a project.
Yeah, I'm getting ahead of us. You're presenting a concept and I'm already trying to
It's
flesh
fair.
out the details. So that's fine.
It's fair.
It says here that the applicant can, if the applicant can demonstrate that the shared spaces will meet parking events by using accepted methodologies, e.g. the Urban Land Institute Shared Parking Report, ITE, parking guidelines, or other approved studies. So
Yeah.
there is some back
Right.
to it.
Okay.
Right. Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, Kyle, I'm a little confused, like, it's like, are you doing most of the work and presenting it to us? Because and for our approval, because I sort of feel I'm not doing a lot of work for this committee. I just sit here and say yes or no, or whatever I say. Is that how it's supposed to be? Or are we supposed to be fleshing everything out?
Uh, I think really the role of the committee is to provide kind of that first response on behalf of the community to say this aligns with what we want to see in town. And if there's questions, of course, please, if
Yeah.
if any of these things seem really uncharacteristic to Hadley, and keep in mind we're imagining a potential Hadley. We're writing zoning for what could be that currently can't be. So keeping that in mind and keeping in mind the input from our community engagement events and different forums, what I'm asking of the committee members is to affirm that we're on the right track, or to offer that little bit of guidance or direction or even disagreement that we need to think of a particular element or a topic a little differently so that it better fits what Hadley wants to see.
Hadley. Thank you.
Yeah, whether it helps or not, in my mind, I think of this, I compare it to my daily working as an architect. And in this case, Kyle is the architect and we are the client.
Okay.
And he's drawing up and we say, oh, I don't like that. I do like this. Let's change that.
Okay.
That's the way I'm thinking of it, that
Helpful.
big because he brings all the specialty and the training and the knowledge of planning, and we give the thumbs up, thumbs down, more to the left, more to the right. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
So that's shared parking. At this point, we haven't added any text in regards to the reduction of parking. Most communities don't add anything extra to it. They just say, these are instances where you can reduce the number of spaces. And the final topic for parking is location. And again, this is smart growth zoning. The idea is to create more pedestrian friendly or pedestrian centric development. So parking, the standard parking lot kind of in the expanse of space between the front of a building and the right of way, the main roadway. That doesn't fit into smart growth, because you create all this impervious surface, you create all this heat, you create all this distance that the person that depends on transit has to clear to get from bus stop to business entrance. So typically this is pretty standard language. It's in red here. But parking is typically prioritized or required at the rear or to the side of the main entrance to the facade facing the roadway. So the language that we provided is standard for the most part. The one clause that we added is that last sentence regarding structured parking. And this is there for the very unlikely, and I think we've talked about this, very unlikely event that a small garage or type of facility could be developed. But I think this would also apply to, say, an apartment complex or a mixed use complex that had kind of a dedicated parking galley for residents, right? If they wanted to do something like that. So this last sentence, structured parking must be wrapped with active uses or high quality architecture on any facade facing a public street or an open space. So that's to try to make sure that if a development wants to build a structured parking area, it needs to blend into the development, particularly if it's facing the public street or an open space where people are going to be.
What does active uses mean?
I'm assuming that's retail, commercial, something, so that
Oh, right.
and yeah, so that I'm assuming
Enclosed by.
it's got,
Okay.
like, it's behind a mall or it's behind a structure that is what you're going to. Kind of like you go to Thorns and behind it is the parking garage. It's wrapped by that. That's my interpretation. And Kyle, you can amend my thinking as required.
I think you're accurate there, Mark, because it's really saying that these can't be like standalone structures. They need to be integrated somehow. Some parking garages get kind of put beneath or kind of attached to a main building. Again, we understand this is kind of an unlikely scenario, but it's to say, if it were to become feasible and appealing to a developer, that it can't just be a standalone parking facility you know, it needs to blend in. It needs to be kind of mixed in with active uses like retail and residential. And the face that is closest to the street or to an open space needs to kind of blend in to the built environment. It doesn't stand out as just a big concrete wall.
Yeah, I think that that's very reasonable, and keeping in mind that it, I would be shocked if we ever had a parking garage built. It'd have to be a pretty big project like the mall or something to justify the amortization of the cost of that. So
Right.
I don't expect it in my lifetime. But you never know what's around the corner.
Right. And again, I think keeping in mind that we're exploring 40R and smart growth zoning to say, you know, if these things were to ever come about, the town wants to see it in a certain way. And this allows the town to say this very unlikely event, if it were to happen, needs to blend in and isn't going to really look out of place. So that's kind of where we're at with parking. We've added just a few small things. I think the number of spaces is an area that we can continue to discuss and find that sweet spot. And if the committee wants us to go more kind of use by use, we can explore that as well. That's what other communities have done. So I'd welcome any thoughts on that currently.
I don't know if you were able to.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah, no, I couldn't either. But so, in a quick synopsis, we talked about the fact that Hadley's current parking is a minimum of 2 for 1, 2 square feet of parking for 1 square foot of building.
Yeah.
Floor plan, and we clarified that 2 square feet of parking includes the parking spaces and the travel aisle. So Kyle had done some math where it was like 12 spaces per 1,000 square foot of building, but I think it's actually going to be less than that, but it's still a lot more than what the state, the 40R draft from the state is pushing a maximum of 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. And we talked about that could be a studio, 1 person, it could be a 2 bedroom, it could be a 3 bedroom, and they want a maximum of 2. Justification being that it's on the public transit and that you have shared parking so that you don't have reserved resident parking separate from during the day commercial parking. So the idea is that it's mixed use and you come home and you park at night, and then when you leave in the morning, the business is open and that parking is, that's the idea that the state, I don't know that it applies so much in Hadley as it would in Boston, but anyway, that's what we were discussing, just to kind of bring you. I hope that the recording that we can view has better audio than what we're experiencing through the owl. Let's just say it's a bad owl.
Do we know how, for instance, East Hampton has its regulations? Do we actually know that they work, or they have too much parking in some of them? I hate to create something that is already shown to be too many parking spaces or too few.
Building off of what Ronnie says, is there a chart or anything that compares what we have to, like, for example, East Hampton or places that have smart growth and then what they're experiencing?
I'll just jump in and say, I don't think he has it yet, or he would have showed us,
Okay.
but Kyle did mention early on that separately, he's working with the planning board on looking at revising, but that's not 40R, that's more, and that's looking at
The general,
numbers based on the use of the, yeah. So with that, Kyle, yeah, I'm assuming you don't have a chart for us yet. He said he's just putting that together for the planning board.
Correct. I don't have that right now. I'm happy to get that circulated as soon as it's ready. That was my intention in the first place, to kind of keep you all in the loop, because this is kind of an important part of the 40R regulations. It's one of those areas where we're going to really rely on the committee to offer some guidance.
yeah, I think we just need some comparisons and some data from what other communities are experiencing right now. Kind of flying in the dark about knowing what else is out there.
Yeah, and there's, I think Kyle talked about language that let us ease the requirements or massage the requirements. But we can't do that preciously. But I was thinking, for example, let's say hypothetical that has been tossed around by a number of people. If part of the mall were demolished, like the east wing of the White House, and repurposed for housing, not a ballroom, you might say that the parking that's existing might be adequate. But when it was built under the 2-for-1, so that's gonna be a complicated, but maybe if Hadley adopts a new based on use, parking, it's a Pandora's box. It's and I think it may trigger strong reactions in town, although I don't think anyone would argue that our 2-for-1 is excessive. And when I have argued in the past on the planning board, they've said that some of it can be reserved and doesn't, they just have to have the ability.
Yes, you have to show the ability. And there's also other options.
Yes, so
To make it feasible.
so the excess, the minimum can be used at the bargaining chip. But the state is turning it the other way and saying they want a maximum that's lower than our minimum. But this is different than, so.
So I guess the other thing, just thinking, so this is just for residential. If it's a mixed use structure, is there something that says, this is required for the commercial? Okay, yeah, not
The bottom
residential,
line,
yeah. Okay,
And
Yeah, so I think,
by
Kishore, the way that we are thinking about it, presenting it this way, if the hope is to encourage more mixed use development, and thinking that this is going to be encouraged and or required to be shared parking facilities, that you get those two spaces per 1,000 square feet of the non-residential space, and then you start calculating, the multiplier based on total bedrooms, depending on the mixture of units. And remember, when we talked about affordability, we talked about, we can require certain number of units be 3-bedroom plus. So hitting that 1.5 multiplier per dwelling. So you can end up, creating shared parking facilities for mixed uses that could have, a pretty high threshold or a high maximum based on this calculation. We can crunch the numbers. We certainly can look at comparisons. And I think certainly, to address Ronnie's question, we can reach out to some of these 40R communities or HLC to see, what parking requirements seem to be really working, and report back on that.
Andrew, I missed all of your comments, so if you'd like to repeat them. No pressure.
I didn't have any right now.
I just wanted you to
Well,
know that
yeah, no,
I can pass the talking stick.
yeah, no, I have some, I have some concerns about the parking, like the limit of parking, because ultimately there's going to be students in moving into the in any residential, and they tend to have quite a few cars. And short of Route 9, Hadley isn't that accessible via public transportation. So really, realistically, the only way you can either work and live on Route 9 is if you either work on the immediate bus route or drive. And I don't know, the parking just seems a little limited.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think that at least a number of residents I can think of would love to see us somehow craft the bylaw to limit or prevent students. There's certainly as much as UMass supports the local economy, it's also the monster when you have partying kids next door to your trying to raise your kids.
Yeah.
So, but we've already heard that we can't limit it by age.
But we could limit it. I forgot I think we discussed about, I think you might have mentioned, you can't have more than 2 or 3.
Non-family,
Yeah.
yeah.
Unrelated.
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 That's something that, I don't know if we ever looked into, Kyle, if that's allowed or not, or I know we discussed it, but that might be, I know other communities around us have adopted it or tried to adopt it to make sure that housing goes to non-students as much as possible.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into investigating if other communities have worked with that question. I know that typically age restrictions can't be required for the 40R developments. Unless it's kind of voluntarily designed, if it's a project that's designed for such. And I think we had talked about that in a past meeting. So I can circle back, and I've got a laundry list of questions for EOHLC that I need to connect with them about. So I'll bring that one up too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would love to have, if we did 3 zones instead of 2, we had the central, whatever it's called, the town center part to the west. We had the other part that going toward the mall, maybe past the mall, going east. There was a section that was welcoming students, like put them on the Amherst border. That would be, it would be great, but it doesn't sound like I've heard any reference to that being something that the state, is interested in. And that may ultimately, if we can't fence the students off to the east, that we may not get this through town meeting. So that,
Yeah, I mean, let's go, let Kyle do his
yeah,
homework research and see what we come back as, and
right.
we'll go from there.
I just didn't want to be overly optimistic.
So, Mark, since you've spoken about kind of where the districts are, I'd like to spring into our next topic of the conversation for tonight, and just recognizing we're at 6:07.
Yeah.
So, in terms of where these districts really are, there are the bylaw itself is a major part of the application that we need to be ready to submit to the state to get that statement of eligibility before we even go to town meeting to get adoption through the town. And part of that application requires maps drawn, a boundary of the district, and some calculations of total area, total number of parcels, total, I think they call it future zoned units. So, if it were to adopt, how many new units could the town anticipate based on the density that we've outlined? And how many of those could be affordable? There's some math that needs to be associated with that. So we're hoping that we can start to narrow down where we're talking about, so we can start doing some of that work behind the scenes. And we understand that the assumption is that we're really talking about the business corridor, right? I believe as a committee, we kind of reached that conclusion. So we understand that the north and the south is set because the zoning district is kind of that's how it's defined, but it goes the whole length of the Route 9 corridor. And we've talked about two districts in the east towards the Hampshire Mall, and in the west, kind of in the village center, roughly. We don't know exactly what that means. So if we could have a little bit of conversation tonight about where we can start to really narrow these districts, just a couple of points of reference, and I can pull up the town GIS and we can zoom in a little bit better, but just for quick reference, when we think about the east, the resident survey, the mall and Maple Street, that's really where people were focused. And at the community event, again, the Hampshire Mall property is central in kind of feedback that we got. And just to clarify, the state frowns upon like single parcel districts. So we'll want to go beyond the mall, but how far beyond the mall is what I would like to discuss with you. So that's the east.
I think you go all the way
And for the west,
to the border.
Yeah, I'd probably stop at Staples, but
I don't, you asked a question, how, like right now, let's focus on this. So do you want to discuss how far east we would go? I wouldn't mind going towards basically Amherst all the way to the border. In that area, Mark was saying Staples. I don't know. Drew and Ronnie, do you have any?
Where is the border?
Border, I think, is right around Vesta.
Yeah, Friendlies.
Friendlies?
Used to be in Hadley, so
Did
that's
it?
right, yeah. I think like the heirloom collection,
Mhm.
I think around that area,
Yeah.
right before Domino's. The Domino's is definitely in Amherst.
I mean, the community was saying like really focused on the mall. So I mean, I think if we were to say all the way to Amherst, the town wouldn't be on board with that. Like the focus tended to be like around the mall.
So
So I think
I guess-
if we don't bite off more than we can chew, we might get somewhere with this. But if we just go and just say mall all the way to Amherst, it's a little too much, in my opinion.
So do you want to go where like up until like Midas is?
I mean, what do you do with the businesses that are there? You're not gonna tear them down.
No, you're just creating an overlay so that if someone wants to build in that area, they'll get some leniency if they're gonna put housing.
Right.
You're not changing, you know, you're not saying that what's there is, you're not negating the underlying zoning.
Right. Right. Think of it really as kind of adding a layer, we're really trying to imagine this as like an expansive opportunity. We're expanding opportunity for development so that if there is a national chain like Staples that leases a building, that property owner can say, you know, you're leasing that building, but half of that parking lot is wasted space. Let's throw in a couple duplexes. You know, it doesn't negate that existing use. Or they could say, you know, Staples, you're out of luck and we're gonna reimagine it. And this is just to make an example. I know nothing about this property or the property owners, but just to try to clarify, this is an expansive exercise. This is to create more options for property owners and developers in town.
Yeah, but I just, what Andrew said, it made sense to me once he said it regarding, you know, the folks that came in here said the mall, and to that point, I don't think they extended it. Look, I'm trying to think back to the drawings, but it was clearly up until that point. And I think we should start with up until there and from a starting point and maybe expand it later if we want.
I think it would be helpful to do this in person at a future meeting and have the maps, because we could make a big area and then find out that it's got this spotted frog or it's wetland or it's whatever, and the state will catch and say, well, you look like you provided a large area, but there's no real developable lots there, so.
I mean, the way I'm looking at it is like, there's nothing to stop us from expanding the 40R at a later date. So like, if we were to just kind of focus our efforts initially, it would be more palatable to the town and to like the community.
Yeah.
Like I would love to say like just do all of Route 9, but I don't think that's really going to be viewed well.
Right. And I think it's that type of thinking, Andrew. I think that's the planning board is going to appreciate that, because the planning board, to my understanding, the charge is to create a bylaw that can pass town meeting. So taking a moment to think about not only what input you've received up to date, but your past knowledge, your working knowledge of your neighbors and fellow Hadley residents, what's the pushback that you're going to face? What are those concerns going to be? And you're right. You can always expand the district. It's what the planning board has been exploring with the senior housing, right? Is they've expanded it. They've added, they've moved it to cover this kind of block between 116 and North Maple and Rocky Hill and Route 9, right? So it's easier to kind of expand than to try to kind of pull back and once you get a development or two underway and people start to see it, you have the persuasion to go for that type of expansion.
Yeah, what is it? 26A or something that, I think that's what, is that where that Marriott is now? Right there? 26A. And then the 27A looks like where the, that restaurant is.
Oh, Applebee's
Applebee's is, yeah.
and then the bank.
Looks like there could be wetlands back behind there.
Yeah, that's the, what is it, Fish and Wildlife?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that a little bit better for folks?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
aerial imagery.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that Westgate Center Drive, that's where once you turn onto it, you have Staples to the right. And then, I don't know what 27A is, but
That's Applebee's, yeah.
that's Applebee's. Okay.
And then the next one to the east, that's that new hotel. I'm thinking it's a Marriott, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
It's under an LLC, I guess.
Yeah. And we can try to measure, that stretch of Route 9 if we think that Maple Street is kind of the western boundary, you're thinking if we go all the way to Westgate, that's 2,500 feet, that's less than half a mile, a little less than half a mile, I think. And if you take it all the way up to Greenleaves, that's 2/3 of a mile.
I wonder what that 26B 26 are. Not sure how developable they are, but yeah. We lost Kishore, he had to leave,
Okay.
so we've lost our quorum.
Where's the bike path? Can you, it's below it, so I'm trying to think when you're on the bike
It's
path.
behind it, it's down,
Yeah, what do you see there? Just
the bike path is here.
It's way down here.
green leaves. I mean, you see buildings there
You,
when you're on the bike.
yeah, you pass the back of that
Yeah.
development, but I think that's the Amherst part, I'm not sure.
Yeah, then you're in the Amherst back here.
So some of it is developed.
So it looks like these two buildings on Greenleaves Drive
Yeah,
are in Amherst, are in Hadley. And actually, there's three. 1, 2, 3 are in,
It's really weird
And
that it's in two communities.
yeah, no, that's,
Well,
yeah.
although it just says Greenleaf
It's like
Drive.
there's 3 there and there's 2 there. So looks like there's actually
Sorry, Mark, I'm lost where you're
5
Pointing to.
buildings. Might be. Fish. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just,
Yeah, that was
I,
like,
I was looking at parcel 23 and the southeast part of parcel 26. That, those are existing housing complexes that I would leave out of the district, just to not complicate things.
Okay, so would it be easier to start with maybe imagining the district, the business zones, north and south of Route 9 to 116 and Westgate Center? And include the 27B, C, 29, and then cut back to the mall?
That seems like a good starting
so.
point.
I don't think you want to get too far. Yeah, I don't think. The
mhm.
public
This
transit.
is a crude
So I
estimation
think
of
if you include
area,
mall,
but that's approximately 122
Yeah.
acres.
okay,
That's, that's total area. That's not developable area, but that's, 100 plus
Right.
acres.
right, right. That's,
It-
that's a starting point, and we can look at the pros and cons, I guess.
How much of it is developable?
Right. That would be helpful to do the overlays.
yeah. And we have to do that calculation whenever it
Yep.
comes time to submit the districts. We have to show what is actually developable property and how much of that is already developed, how much is undeveloped. We have to exclude wetlands, open water, and the like.
The 28A.
I'm sorry, say that one again,
Johnson
Mark.
there. I think that one, the parcel 28A, the Howard Johnson, there's
Right.
been rumors, I think that was recently bought by Barry, and I think they're kind of just biding their time, hoping that this goes through so they could develop that or redevelop that into housing. Um, 27, that's the 5 College, right? I think that's where that,
5 College
bank
Credit
is.
Union.
I think that's, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But that is that's a helpful kind of
So you've got
preliminary to starting point. So we have a starting point for the East District. Can we look at the West District quickly?
Sure.
We go back, let me go back to. All right, so you can see my slides again. The West District from the survey, we got a lot of answers. So there were several that said, do the whole thing, reimagine the whole corridor. A lot of responses actually said from the bridge to West Street-ish, which is really to the west of town. But most recently at the community event, it really focused on town center, which would be kind of around the municipal uses, library, town hall. And there was mention of Railroad Street, which is this kind of
Mhm.
this little road that goes parallel to the
Yep.
rail trail. So this is kind of what the community has been thinking about for the west. And if
I
we go
think-
back, yeah, go ahead.
I
Those
think
are
Railroad
small-
Street makes the most sense for mixed use, or for 40R. It's close enough to everything in the center, but far enough removed that it's not really
Hmm.
like if it was like all of Route 9, like that would be a nightmare for traffic. Like the bridge can't
Right.
support traffic as is, but Railroad Street's removed enough. There's the old potato build. Like there's a lot of potential uses in that area. Like it's not a high traffic area. It's accessible. There's a lot of the bike trail runs through it. It just seems like an underutilized location.
Right.
Like the town commons right
Right.
there.
So thinking about that, Andrew, would it make sense to just kind of limit this to kind of West Street to Middle Street? Or would you want to go as far as
I would stay
Yeah.
with West and Middle. I know that that's a small area, but I think of like what the community is looking for. That's probably the best chance of giving that. Like that
Okay.
seems like the one area where you could like actually build a place that people have like in their mind of what they want would be in that area.
Right. Okay.
And is that all this in the senior housing overlay as well?
I can show where the overlay is. Yeah, the horizontal hash, this is all senior village senior overlay. So it includes all of this currently.
Yeah. It's up to the rail trail and something like a couple 100 feet south of Route 9.
So yeah, so if we did it like this, I think that would include there's some parcels here. I know this is the school.
Yep.
But
I know there's
there's already like some sections of that type of enclosure. I know it's kind of an interesting little part of Route 9. You've got the bend to the west, and then you've got some flashing crosswalk, and traffic can get backed up a little bit around Middle Street going eastward. But with the rail trail and the town common, I think it makes sense to kind of imagine it as, this is kind of an acceptable kind of scale to play with in the heart of town. So we would think we could do something like here. That's approximately 50 acres, a little bit less with the right of ways for Route 9 and Railroad Street and the rail trail, but 45 acres or so.
Yeah.
Of course, keeping in mind the school's not going to be touched.
And I don't know
I
if we
was-
could go another block east.
Yeah,
What about with,
Go ahead.
like, how does, like, say, like Russell School, if that falls under the 40R, like, does that change the developability of it? Mark?
Might make it more amenable. Yeah.
Can you point me to the Russell School?
Yeah, it's, you just kind of took it off. It's, well, it's 5A.
5A.
Right
Oh,
across
okay. At
from-
the corner.
It's between town hall and the school. Yeah, it's between town hall, which is 47, and,
you mean that old building that nobody can decide what to do as it falls apart more and more?
the Russell School, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's that's let's see, I'm trying to see how big that property is. It's 1.87 acres, but that could be a couple of small duplexes, triplexes tucked in around a historic building that might be a community space, or you can get creative with adaptive reuse with an old school building.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I
If-
think there's a lot of people that would love to see that turned into a, what do you call it, manor house or something of condos, because they like the old character of the
okay.
philosophy to make it meet current building codes.
But we think for now, a starting point, West Street to Middle Street is enough. It includes some underutilized properties that show potential for mixed use or this type of density.
If you zoom out, what if we get West Street to East Street?
If we did it, we can measure the length of Route 9 there. So it would be you're talking about it's 3/4 of a mile of Route 9. Here's that. There's your area. And if we do the area,
And I'm wondering about, what about the old Stan the vegetable man? That even goes up past there. That's a possible parcel to redevelop.
yeah. So that
Yeah.
makes a district that's approximately 128
It's over around
Acres.
15.
total. It would make a second district about the same size as the first one to the east. So they'd be about the same area.
Okay.
I think what's appealing about expanding it to East Street is you have a lot of these long parcels, like and I don't know what they're used for and currently, but 30, 31, 32. There's
Yeah.
opportunity there to like expand to fill those in a little bit. If they are currently residential,
Yeah.
you can start building more housing onto those parcels or
I think,
you know
yeah, I think 30 and 31 are the ones that we saw that were discussed at the last two planning board meetings. There is,
for solar.
uh, no, they're
Oh,
actually
okay.
thinking about housing,
Oh, okay,
but it
cool.
would, but currently it would have to be senior housing.
Right,
Are
right.
there houses old house, big ones?
On the street.
Yeah,
And then,
oh,
and
okay.
then there's a field behind them.
Oh, okay.
And so they were looking at doing, I don't know if, I could be wrong. I want to say maybe Barry Roberts had a option on them and they were just floating by us if they
Mhm.
carved them up to keep the existing houses and then
Mhm.
basically create this kind of a senior housing flag lot behind it that would have a loop. So there is an effort to do that.
Yeah, I think having a larger district gives people more options for places, for people who might want to build.
Yeah.
Uh,
So am I getting a sense from the three of you that we could start working with this current idea, West Street to East Street? Just the business zone?
Yeah, I mean, I could even consider including, up to the Knights Inn or including the Knights Inn, because there's some space west of Knights Inn that is
We we can always add to it, Mark,
There's-
if we wanted to start
Wasn't
getting
there a
some
fire?
numbers.
yeah,
okay. Yeah, I mean, what if you took it up to 20 and 16? I don't know if that makes any sense. If you, yeah, if you, I was, we put that on the table to think about it. We can always carve it out.
Right.
But I think there are some opportunities for there are developable land there, 13, 15, 16-1. 17, is that where the you store it is? I can't remember. Yeah, and then down to West Street, that's, we could start there and then all have opinions on whether we reduce it or,
Yeah, so you're getting closer to like 160 acres. You're including a lot of, I think, kind of undeveloped properties, and some of it are field and some of it is just large residential lots that aren't all built out, but we can start with that if you'd like, and we can always, carve off and scale back whenever we start to refine the numbers, but this can start to give us a sense of what we're imagining in town.
yes, the lot 28 is, parcel 28 is current, affordable housing, elderly, that's a state. The one here, East Common Drive, that's not so affordable housing. That was one where he did the affordable housing and payment in lieu of, did not put affordable units on it.
which is good because of what the HOA fees have gone to. It would
Oh,
be
yeah.
very hard,
Yeah.
somebody. Why not just do it to Spruce? Is there a reason?
I don't know.
Okay.
We could,
We could take it all the way to Spruce if that would be a good, if you want to get all that information,
yeah,
we
we
can.
can, starting point, and then we can look at, see if it makes sense or not.
Okay, that sounds good. I am just going to give us a time check at 6:40.
Oh, yeah, we
So
should.
I'd like to, I think we've got a, a starting point. I think I'll definitely do East Street to West Street, and then we'll look at adding a little bit all the way over to Spruce, but we'll get all the numbers for those options. And the East District seems pretty defined between Maple and Westgate Center. So I just want to go back to the presentation. So thank you for the discussion on districts. So really what we've done to date, we've worked through I think 7
Nick,
provisions.
Looks like we're gonna continue. Want to do a press a button on the remote control. I don't know what that is. Press any button on the remote control.
So everything okay, Mark?
Yep, we were
Okay.
about to lose our screen, but I followed directions. We're still with
Okay.
you.
Okay. I just wanted to kind of recap what we've discussed, what we've been working on. At this point, we've gotten a lot of detail. We've kind of gotten the nuts and bolts, not all tightened down, but in place for, permitted uses, affordability, dimensional density, and parking requirements. I've got some feedback, research to come back to, things to clarify. And outside of the design standards, which I highlighted in blue, most of what's left is administrative, procedural. Most communities just copy and paste from the model or cross-reference to, administrative things that are elsewhere in zoning.
Okay.
So there's not a lot of the remaining provisions that we're going to have a lot of back and forth with the steering committee. And there's a lot on my to-do to polish off and circle back to. And now with the district delineations, we've got some mapping and calculations to work on.
So do you want us to push our next meeting into December so you have November to work, or?
That's essentially what we're going to recommend, to take a little bit of a pause for our meetings. That'll give us time to clean up what we've been working on, to clarify a few things, and get the other pieces in place. And I think we're going to try to get it into a cleaner working document so it's not so big and clunky to navigate, so people can quickly get through it. We can make sure all those pieces are set. And then in 2026, we can tackle the last big topic, which is design standards. That's our recommendation at this point, and welcome to your thoughts.
Sounds good.
Sounds good to me, Andrew.
Sounds good to me.
Great. Okay. So I think
So
what we'll do,
you think you'll send us something in November to ponder before we see you in December, or?
yeah, I think what I would like to do is try to get everything tightened up and repackaged and back to you by early, 1st of December. And then we can
That'd be good. If you could give us a week or two to process it.
Yeah, that's what I want to do is send it back in a more complete form, give a couple of weeks as we coordinate and schedule that next meeting. That'll give everybody time to give me thoughts or write down their thoughts so that we can have a more thorough conversation to finalize all these other provisions, and then we can look at, what we want these future development projects to look like, and how we want the parking to look, and how we want the curbs to look, and how we want the landscaping to look, to really kind of blend into what exists and fits in with what Hadley is hoping to create. That'll be our conversation in 2026. Sound good? So
Yeah.
I'll follow up with Mark and everybody remotely. I'll share this presentation and then outline in the email kind of what we're going to be working on over the next 6 weeks or so. And kind of set a tentative time frame that we'll try to get a new working document back to everybody.
Okay. What does everybody think about middle of December? I mean, we're getting close to this holiday parties and
Yeah, it's
all
hard to
kinds
do too much.
of other activities going on.
Do we want to give people time to kind of review calendars? I can send out a doodle poll, or we can do it that way if folks don't have dates marked off.
I don't think I have any conflicts, but I'm sure other people
Yeah.
might.
At this point, I don't even know my calendar. I haven't looked that far ahead, so I can't commit to anything tonight.
Might be best to wait because Randy and Kishore are not here as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I can do that.
Yeah.
I can set up kind of a polling system.
Yeah, that would be good. Maybe from like Monday the 8th to Friday the 19th, and see what
Yeah.
people have.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll include that on our follow-up email. Get people to look ahead and throw out some ideas. All right.
Yes.
That's all I've got for tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you all. Really appreciate it. Apologies for the technology.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. I'll blame it on Jeff Bezos.
It's fair.
There's only three of us. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. You moved. Is there a second?
Second,
Andrew, do you second the motion to adjourn?
second,
Okay. We'll do a roll call vote, I guess. Ronnie,
In favor?
in favor. Andrew
Andrew, in favor.
and Mark Dunn, aye, in favor. So